Good evening. Happy Thursday, friends. We got a wonderful show today here on Full Bloom, Heidi and I's show on the Hill of Roses Network, where we collaborate to bring political and economic power to people like you. Heidi, want to let everyone know who we have on today and what we'll be talking about?
Yeah, absolutely, John. I'm super excited to welcome my good friend Paget Kagy to the show. She is an actress, writer, creative, prominent YouTuber, prominent Yang Gang member, and advocate for universal basic income. We're thrilled to talk to her about her channel, about her thoughts about current events and what's going on recently in the news, and some fun topics as well, just to get a little personal and find out more about her. Yeah. So let's get going.
Okay, we got Paget here. Whoa. Hey, Paget.
Hi. Wow, that was quite an introduction, Heidi. Like, it kind of scared me. I got excited about myself. So yeah.
We have to put the tables on you now. We're turning the tables on you. Yes.
Oh man.
It seems I'm a little bit frozen on this, but you know what? I'm really glad to be able to talk with you, Paget. Maybe the video will catch up with the thoughts that we're trying to share today.
I love that.
The first thing I'd love to talk to you about is like the beginning of your journey. Tomorrow is going to mark your 1-year anniversary of being like a Gang content producer, yes. July 3rd. I wanted to ask you, for those that didn't know you from the very beginning, what caused that transition for you from going from being an actress previously with like Cat Loves LA, which was the video you did before that, detailing about that, into talking about Andrew Yang?
Yeah. So, man, I mean, I've told this several times, but I am like the least politically active, interested, engaged human being. This is very well known among my friends and family. In fact, it's actually caused a little bit of conflict because like, how can you be so indifferent? How can you be so apathetic to the world around you? And I'm like, because I don't care and it don't matter. And then I saw Andrew Yang on Joe Rogan, not because I was interested in politics, but because I was more interested in talking about Asian American specific issues. And so I heard from my dad, it was actually on Father's Day, then he was like, I was really ticked off that MSNBC, there was like the Asian, the Andrew Yang guy who was on the stage and they only asked him like 2 questions. And I was like, what? Like, are we being attacked right now? Like, are we under threat as the Asian American community on national TV? So I actually Googled him because I'm like, maybe there's a reason that they only asked 2 questions. And then I saw Joe Rogan and I'm like, what the F? How can they only ask me 2 questions? And I just like went down this rabbit hole. We all have done it, right? Where, I don't shout. No, I'm just joking. But it's almost kind of like that, where it's like there's like a few days when you just get into that rabbit hole and you feel like you're not showering or eating and you're just constantly listening to what he has to say. And then it got to July 2nd, I believe, or something like that, or maybe it was July 3rd. But I was just driving and I'm like, this guy is so inspiring. I want to kind of do another channel with just like a vlog channel. Why don't I just like do a random video on why I like this dude so much and his ideas? And then I just put that out into the ether. I wasn't really part of the Yang Gang at that point. I really wasn't part of anything. And I just put it out and I'm like, no one's going to watch this, but that's the start of my channel. And then I don't remember like what happened, but some people started watching it and some people are asking me, hey, can you do a video on this? Can you do a video on that? And I was like, oh, people actually want this content. And then I just got into putting out more videos, due to demand. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. So that was it. 0 to 100 real quick.
Yeah. I frankly thought that the evolution from a man who is blatantly silenced on stage to where he is today is truly an incredible journey. Did you think at that time he had a chance, or was it simply, you said it was mainly due to the Asian factor and that unity that you had with him, that you just wanted to stick up with him? Did you believe back then that he had any serious chance?
No, that's a good question, actually, because of the way I framed it. So the reason why I was like, and I remember actually going to Steve, right, during one of these delirious days where I was still in my robe at 5 p.m. And I went up to him with my laptop and I was on the Joe Rogan podcast video and I looked at the YouTube section comments and I'm like, wait, this guy has to win. Steve, you have to listen to this. This guy has to win. Look at all these comments about all these like people who voted for Trump who like Andrew Yang. And so actually I did think that there was something to really be mined there. There was huge amounts of potential for this to blow up simply because honestly, it was just evidenced by the comments on the YouTube video where a lot of Trump people are like, it's either Yang or I'm going back to Trump. You know, that was a revelation, I think.
Yeah, it's so hard to unite a YouTube comment section. I do think that was one of the most novel accomplishments, frankly, in my opinion, that he was able to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned at the beginning, Padgett, like your family and then, you know, being like, what are you doing kind of thing. How has that evolved for you? Like, how have you personally evolved through the journey from being more apathetic to where you are now? I mean, now you talk about politics daily. And in some ways, you know, like multiple times a day or at certain times during the past year, it, you know, took over your life. So how does that feel like personally, just going from being more of a creative actress, being involved in one realm now to this totally different realm? Like, what have you gone through personally with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. You know, there were certain goals and certain projects that I was in the middle of working on, creative projects. And then this came along and it did completely take me for a total turn in my, you know, what I imagined to be my life's trajectory personally and then, you know, professionally, obviously. But it was like one of those things where I'm like, we only have a finite amount of time and then we're going to know if it doesn't work. Right. Yeah. How we always get to, like, you know, convince ourselves into things. It's like, but it's only for this amount of time. And then, you know, months later after he drops out, but, yeah, no, it's been really interesting. I had to go through, and I'm still going through a period of catching up with understanding, you know, the regular discourse in politics around certain topics. I still am not. So if you ask me about something going on, you know, overseas or something, I'm not necessarily going to have an educated answer for you because quite honestly, I haven't been paying attention to it for years. Yeah, I'm still learning, but yeah, I mean, Heidi, it's been really, really strange for my friends and family who are like, WTF is going on right now? Like, I can't even have a freaking conversation with you without you talking about universal basic income. Andrew Yang, how incredibly corrupt the two political parties are. Like, what is going on? Get it together. We used to talk about mascara, okay? No, just joking. But you know, that it has been really strange, I think, for the people closest to me, because they're like, wow, this woman is possessed. She's a little obsessive and a little possessed. And it'd be great if I could have a normal conversation with her.
I mean, we could get to the normal conversation after you learned about UBI. Start embracing it. Then we get past that point.
But that's exactly kind of how it goes. It's like, now they're going to entertain me for a good 20 minutes. And then it's like, well, anyway, so let's talk about but when it does come to some other creative things, Heidi, I actually remember telling you, I am actually working on those as well. Now I'm able to get back to some of those things like script writing and stuff. So I've had some sort of break in that way to get back to that, but it's so hard to turn it off, right? So as we all know, why are we all here?
So, Padgett, I'm super curious, you know, that evolution process, you know, post Yang dropping out. How did you like go about figuring out what the next steps were there? Because, you know, there's a whole big attitude, you know, the candidacy and you're the promoter of one person. He drops out. He's no longer in the running. What did you think at that point in time of how you transitioned your channel?
I'm going to be honest, John, I actually thought that my channel was 100% dead. And is it getting like the same amount of attention or traffic that it used to? Absolutely not. Did I expect that? Completely. That is such a natural like evolution if the candidate that you surround your channel on like drops out, right? And there's nothing daily to talk about when it comes to this campaign. But I have found something really beautiful in, you know, a large percentage of the Yang Gang community. You know, it's surprising, you know, obviously there's some drop off because people have lives to take care of, but, you know, there's a certain percentage of us who are still really like, you know, engaged with each other within this community and other causes and congressional candidates and all of that. And there's still work to be done. So I never really planned on what would come next. I actually thought it was going to end. And then I just thought, you know what, like, okay, if no one watches my videos, or if only a few people watch my videos, so what? Like, that is still a community of people to talk, like, who are still engaging, right? And I didn't want to just disconnect myself completely, because I enjoy being able to connect with those people, and I enjoy being able to talk about some of these things and like the specific obvious perspectives that I have on some of these things. So yeah, no, there's no plan. Like, no plan whatsoever. It's just going with it, you know, the way I see it evolving.
Yeah. So one question I had was about Steve. I mean, how did that work? Like, was he Yang Gang before you? Did you make him Yang Gang? Like, how did that actually, because I couldn't tell. I could never tell, like, who was more Yang Gang and who pushed who and what. Yeah, I honestly, like, it was like, I thought that, I didn't know. Like, I was like, wait, like, who's actually driving this? And it was
like, great actor. Can I give Steve an Academy Award? No, I'm just joking. No,
it was 100% Paget.
No, well, so in the very beginning, you know, when I looked like a troll, I didn't have makeup on, I was in my robe, and I was going up to him being like, you have to look at this video, right? He was like, what is going on, you crazy woman? Please let me go and let me get back to work, right? So that was how the day one.
Okay.
And then it took about 3 weeks after that for him to then start really paying attention under a lot of pressure from me, to what Andrew Yang had to say, to listen to some of his interviews. And then he was like, oh, you know what? And then he got like involved in the community a little bit. And like, he saw the, you know, how engaged people were and how amazing Yang Gang was. And he was like, you know what, maybe there is something here. Oh, Paget, should we go and canvas? And actually, I have to tell you guys, the first thing that I had organized, which was National Yang Gang Day, that was Steve's idea. That came out of his little British brain. And so he is great at coming up with ideas. He has a lot of ideas to share. And then I think from there, Steve is I'm not a very extroverted human being, but Steve is very extroverted. So that's why, Heidi, you probably couldn't tell, because Steve, a lot of the times, he seemed like way more energetic and excited to like go out and do things, right? And I like need time to recharge and everything. But he was like, oh, what are we doing now? What are we doing today? Like, are we going to do a freeway over backpack? You know, and then all this stuff. And so I was the driver, but he was a really nice compliment to that.
Got it. Okay, so we cleared the air. Paget Yankee official. And you know for a fact now what happens.
Yeah.
So, you know, Paget, the last thing I wanted to talk about the past before we flash forward to the present and the future is I wanted to hear, in your opinion, what were some of the biggest lessons you took away from Yang's campaign, from ignored to growth spurt to viral trend to then the very end when he had to drop out? What were some of the lessons you took away from the campaign?
This might transition into the present, but when I look back at what happened to him, you know, during the campaign, especially toward the later part of 2019, I realized there were so many opportunities when Andrew Yang could have gone absolutely viral. Right, where he could have absolutely blown up the media if he was being treated in a similar way that any of the other establishment candidates were. He would have been an absolute rock star.
Yep.
And we did everything that we could to try and support that and make that happen. But there was a bottleneck, which is that he did not have the support, clearly, from the establishment media or anyone in the establishment at that point. He was really like, you know, I don't know the right expression, so I'm not going to say it, but you know what I mean? It was an uphill battle.
Yeah.
And so that is one thing that when I'm reflecting on it, he could have gone completely viral in a way that could have propelled him, you know, at least to, I think, the top 3. But they were never going to let that happen. And I think they really made sure that that didn't happen with the kind of coverage he got. Do you guys remember when, oh my God, I almost forgot her friggin' name because I disliked her so much. Amy Klobuchar, after a debate, they're like, she won. And it was like, they were so desperate to claw on to any other underdog.
I mean, she spoke the most. So if winning a debate is just speaking the most, Klobuchar might have been a winner.
Right.
It was just such.
That's how that's how they spin it in the spin room, the literal spin room. They spin it that way for sure.
Exactly. And then we were looking at like, what is talking about Andrew Yang? So we were only seeing, sometimes just the positive coverage of him when like in the big wide world, there was so much more coverage and positive coverage of all the other establishment candidates. So you're like, how are you supposed to fight that? You really can't. Even though national polling said he was above Klobuchar, I was like, that's a direct FU to Andrew Yang, right? And his campaign. So that was one of the biggest things. I will say that honestly needed better organization on the ground level in Iowa, but that came with money. But I personally think that he should have spent less money on TV ads, some of the later TV ads. And he should have spent, I think back in November, he should have spent that purely on strategizing in Iowa and getting the boots on the ground in a similar way that Pete Buttigieg did. Those were probably the biggest takeaways, like on a high level, that I can really think from his campaign. But yeah.
I mean, do you think though, like honestly, do you think this cycle, it would have made like the big difference that we needed it to make? Or do you just think like they were going for Biden no matter what, and that's just kind of how it was going to be this cycle? Like, what do you actually feel like looking backwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they were going to go with, it doesn't have to be a Biden, but they were going to go with whichever controllable candidate that they could go with. And I mean, we saw Bernie, he was doing phenomenally well, right? Like people thought, oh my God, he's going to run away with it. And all of a sudden, South Carolina, Biden comes number one and everyone's like, yeah, forget about Bernie. Let's go. Right. And then all the establishment candidates just piled on to endorse Biden. I'm just like, what is this shit, like gross mechanism going on here? That's like, they're all lining up to just be part of the system. And so I really do think that, they did just kind of honestly rig it against Bernie. If Bernie even got a little more coverage, he could have stolen the whole thing.
I think the biggest signal that was totally like a little bit more corrupt than it's led on is Buttigieg at the time, after South Carolina, had more delegates than Biden. And he dropped out and backed Biden. Which is just a little bit weird, to say it frank. But, we have to move forward from just the past, because otherwise we're going to go insane from all the corruption.
And we did. It was a roller coaster ride.
It was. There was a lot of emotions. I wanted to ask you where we are today in the present. What do you think are the big things that you as a channel host have been trying to get people's attention to as, an advocate of continuing this movement? Where do you think people's attention needs to go?
I mean, the obvious answer, and it's a correct answer too, whatever you want to define as correct. The obvious one is that, put our efforts behind congressional candidates like Heidi Briones, like, Jen Perelman, like all these candidates who are running right now. I know I'm missing Blair Walsingham. No, I'm missing so many, David Kim. I mean, that's really important to do, obviously, because that is what we have some sort of control over in the present to an extent. But I think, to be quite honest, look, and you guys know, this whole third party thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah, Padgett, let's go. Get into it now.
I mean, that's okay. No, let's not. Yeah,
Ding.
No, but I'm just saying, I think it has to be also something bigger, right? Like, I think what we really need, and obviously maybe not on my small channel, but I feel like we really just need a big shock to the system. The system has led us into such a crisis upon a crisis situation, right? Where people are out in the streets. No one's actually tackling the real problems, the economic problems that will then let us tackle the other problems that are definitely there and exist. And and their interests are to divide us and keep us yelling at each other, because then the attention is diverted away from the real issues that they don't want to necessarily address, right? Because their private interests, their, whatever, are involved in. So to me, that's kind of, if I could just like snap my fingers, obviously we would all probably do this here on this channel, and anyone who's watching, is just like a big shock to the system. Like, this is BS. Reject it. Like, we all like have needs. We all like see where this future of this country could go. So why are we just playing? Why are we just giving up, I guess, and rolling over and being like, all right, I'll play dead for another 4 years, right? Like, that to me, I think is just a bit of a losing mentality. So, I guess I've turned into such a cynic. It's become pretty clear, but it's such a reality. What is that?
I think the opposite. I think that that's a very positive outlook, because I think that what you're saying is something that those of us that have been more involved in politics over all these cycles kind of know. Like, first there's, a president, and you feel like everything's going too radical, and then they kind of placate with somebody who panders to, the populist message, and then everybody's like, okay, they're going to do something about it. I mean, we saw it with Obama. We saw the whole thing go down, and nothing fundamentally changed. And that's what people are scared of, like yourself, who are like, hey, nothing's going to fundamentally change. And I have all this momentum. I have all this passion now. I know exactly what the problems are. And I was, working hard, and I am working hard to solve them every single day. And I can't just placate for another, 4 years. I feel like that's kind of what you're feeling right now. And I feel like that's actually optimistic. I feel like that's actually a positive kind of message.
Well, no, I mean, if you really knew, like, in an immediate future, what I think could potentially happen, you would not think I'm very optimistic. But like, it's just exactly, Heidi. It's like, how can look, and I haven't been in politics for very long, but I believe it when, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds say, I've seen this stuff like for decades and decades, and nothing ever happens. It doesn't matter who you put in there. Nothing ever happens, because the system is not set up in a way to let that happen. Right. And so I guess, that doesn't sound very fun, but I can't help. I can't really hide how I feel about things generally. So on my channel, it's like giving people some news, but also obviously giving my perspective on what is going on, right? And I almost just kind of want people to be conditioned at looking at things in a little bit more of a skeptical way sometimes. Sometimes I don't try and do it all the time, so that, we're not just all just walking around brainwashed. Like, we kind of know what some of the mechanisms are that have interest in brainwashing us to all feel a certain thing or label ourselves a certain thing. I just think that that's really damaging.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think, what you're doing is so important. And I just want to thank you for that, for standing up and saying things that may or may not be popular, using your voice and your channel for that. So I do want to thank you for your voice.
Well, thank you, Heidi. I appreciate that support.
But, I wanted to ask, I think a lot of people here will recognize that there's a flawed system. But the question that we have is sometimes making choices from flawed options. I wanted to ask you first, do you believe that this idea that came forward, the dark horse duo, the unity ticket, is realistic? Do you think it can happen? I think we can all be optimistic and want it to happen. But do you think it's actually tenable when we're having limited ballot access? Several states have already passed their deadlines to be able to get on the ballot. Several states already have it, so you can't actually petition through write-ins to come on. We have a couple deadlines coming up this upcoming week. The total amount in electoral votes that are going to be there is roughly 150. Do you think this is something we can actually do, even if we wanted it right now?
So Obviously, those are the obvious questions, and those are the right questions, right? So we're talking about ballot access issues, right? Some of the states have passed. We're talking about money, right? We're even talking about who are these candidates that we are going to decide on and put forward. Now, here's a little bit of the chicken in that. First of all, with the ballot access thing, there is I'm going to answer your first question, which is with all those things, yes, it is possible. Now, I'm going to be honest. Is it probable? No, but let me ask you a question. Was Andrew Yang's run probable? Did we ever think that it was like, he
didn't win, though. Like, we love him. The movement continues beyond the electoral process. That's what I am wondering, though.
That is exactly the point, though. So it is possible with the ballot access. There are certain specific things that I'm not actually able to share. It hasn't come from my brain, but it's come from someone who's very, very familiar with how to get ballot access. When it comes to financing, there has actually been some people privately who have approached, if this thing kind of takes off, like I'm 100% in to try and get the financing behind this. And I know other people who would be. When it comes to the candidates, it's a very sticky situation, right? You can understand that, especially with Andrew Yang and his position, right? He is fully fledged to help Joe Biden, even if he has to grit his teeth and he's like, oh, this sucks. But he has already done that. So it has to be a matter of getting the will of the people, like an uprising, a surge of people wanting an alternative. And then all the other stuff it obviously takes care of itself. Now, I know that's always what everyone says, but truly, if you look at the numbers, right, there is a high percentage of people in this country who are incredibly dissatisfied with the two options before them. We're looking at a Donald Trump and we're looking at a Joe Biden. I would gather to say the majority amount of Republicans are not super, super, super happy with Donald Trump. Do they support him over Biden? Sure. Is that maybe going down a little bit? Yes. And same with the Democrats as well and the progressives. And we are at this and this is where my optimism starts to wane. We are at a time in our country facing crisis after crisis, right? And a lot of it is economic, and the leaders are not fit to really meet the needs and the demands of the people. People are forced to stay indoors. We're forced to lock down, as well as being unemployed. We are relying currently on the government to make those big moves on our behalf to help us move forward. And we are just met with a lot of stagnation, a lot of stalemate, and a lot of big corporation bailouts, and a lot of moves that don't really make sense for the people and we're not really getting to them efficiently. So I would argue that while it is implausible, right, to a certain extent, it's A, needed, and B, there is no better time to do this. And I'm going to present a potential scenario in which case what we are presenting here with this unity ticket would actually be a bit of a savior in some sense, right? Break glass in case of emergency situation, which you would need some sort of infrastructure, some sort of building of awareness around. Look, imagine this, right? We have people who are very upset and who have reason to be very, very upset, right? They're out in the streets. They're making these demands. Now we're looking at these monuments being taken down and so forth. However you feel about that, it doesn't even matter. Let's just zoom out, not try and put our own personal judgments around it, and think about what this means for a large percentage of white Americans in this country who maybe are not as educated, who maybe, live more in middle America and are thinking to themselves, oh crap, all of this stuff can very easily turn on me, right? And a lot of these people, they're very well armed. So we're looking at a situation potentially. Look, and I don't want to overstate it, but I mean, can you really overstate anything right now in this period of time, where anyone who seems to tip off the balance of the scale that is whatever that's holding up that is currently holding up the fabric of our country right now, could lead to disaster, could lead to a potential all-out riot. We saw how some of the peaceful protests, who came out to take advantage of the peaceful protests, looters, rioters. Mm-hmm. What do you expect could happen if a potential, I don't want to say all out race war, but I mean, it's really just a class warfare, right? Breaks out in this country on any level, in any part of this country. It's not necessarily going to be nationwide, but it could have devastating effects, right? And so people are, and because it has become so politicized, the Republicans stand for this, the Democrats stand for this. If you find yourself on either one of those sides, you are being forced to the extremes, right? And where's the alternative to come in the middle to say, no, I can be a Democrat and I can be a Republican and we can actually work together, whatever the hell those labels mean. I know that it's important for people to label themselves Democrat and Republican. It doesn't really matter, but patriots who can say, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, but I am working purely toward making this country better. That is what we're aiming for. That is what we're trying to build in the system. And I would argue also, Andrew, yeah, you might say, some people might say, well, he was never going to make it. What a failure, blah, blah, blah. I would argue that in his failure, he was a huge success. He paved the road for a better future, right? Like he put the, what is it called? The draft, the drafting paper out, you know, and he's like, look, these are the things that we need to address and pay attention to because it's coming down the pipeline. And guess what? It's all coming down the pipeline. So that is the bigger point of this whole unity ticket. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, it did. I had two follow-ups to that, though. I think you addressed the first point about the potential realistic aspect of it and the bigger picture of what it's trying to accomplish. But I wanted to understand, in your opinion, you know, some people, the biggest concern they'll have with this is the spoiler aspect, potentially, that this could tip the election one way or another. And I've heard they have like the safety valve, they pull it. If they see the polling is not lining up for them, then they're going to say, okay, we can't do this. We have to pull out. But how do you try to unite left and right if the safety valve is simply, we think this is going to cause Trump to win? How do you pull people from the right if that's the case first? And then the second question that I wanted to ask you is, how do we balance, as you said beforehand, the priority of advocating for these down ballot candidates while at the same time pushing this unity ticket, which directly opposes the Democratic Party?
Right. I see what you're saying. The first question was around the fail-safe, right? So how is it not going to be a spoiler, even though we have built in a fail-safe or agreed upon date whereby—
So not just that, but like if you have the fail-safe simply being, we don't want to cause Trump to win, how do you pull people equally from the right and left if this seems biased towards the left?
No. So, I mean, here's the thing. I think that has gotten a little bit mixed up because, you know, I mean, clearly, look, I'm not the brains behind this operation, but, you know, I am one component, I guess, in the background, right? And not even necessarily an important component, but I come from Yang Gang, which is largely progressive, democratically. So, of course, the biggest fear among people in our circles is, oh my gosh, you're going to be a spoiler for Biden, right? And then you're going to hand it to Trump. But that's actually, and so that's why, you know, that is a bit of a thing where that's how we're kind of framing it, simply because that's kind of the audience right now. But if you look at some of the, I don't know if you guys saw the graph where we took a survey of the people who signed up, but it was actually, I was actually shocked because
the independent and Republican, was it?
Yeah, because we've been really pushing this actually mostly to the Yang Gang. So I was like, oh, it's definitely going to look really bad because it's definitely going to be way more Democrats, but it was actually very, very even. So I was shocked by that. And then a good number of people who weren't going to vote and a good number of people who were going to vote for third party anyway. So that is definitely not the intention behind the message. If I have messaged it that way, that is because I am coming from my own bias.
Okay.
But that's not really the intention, because there are a lot of people who are like, the worst thing that could happen is a Joe Biden presidency.
That is true. I'll just interject quickly that, I mean, I brought the idea up to my anti-Trump Republican father, and he loved it. And he was all for it. And because he's biting his tongue kind of like, and he is voting for Biden because he's so anti-Trump. But there's a lot of people like him dying for another option that we don't necessarily talk to when we're in progressive circles and echo chambers that much. But
Yes.
there are a lot of people who are right-leaning that are very, very, unhappy with the two presented choices. So I do want to interject and just agree with that outside of a progressive bubble, this idea does seem very appealing. And I think that that's what's been shown by the data that I've seen as well.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to add on to that. Great point, Heidi, because I actually have some relatives, distant-ish relatives, or rather they're step relatives. I don't know what you call them when you're not blood related. But anyway, they support Trump, but their main support of Trump comes from, I hate the establishment. Their main support of Trump comes from taxes, economy. And when I asked them, would you support this third ticket? And Andrew Yang and what I just said, hypothetically, if it were them. And they actually said yes, right? Because they don't like Trump as a human being, but they're voting for him because they don't have a better option. So I think it's kind of, you can't really underestimate the same exact sentiments that are coming from the right from a different perspective, but still the same sentiments of, not really supporting Trump, but feeling like there's no other better alternative because Biden would be catastrophic.
Yeah.
And, so.
Trump really barely won when you look back at the Republican primary, and so many people were against him.
Yes,
he won because we have a plurality system where the plurality wins. But if we had ranked choice voting, if we had a majority, there is no way that Trump would have won. So you have to realize there's so many disaffected Republicans and independents who are either sitting it out or who are biting their tongue. So, I don't
know about that. As the race went along for Trump, his support grew as candidates dropped out. He had it grow consistently compared to the beginning of the race. But to get back to the second part of the question, I wanted to ask, in your opinion, how do you balance this with the congressional runs and the potential friction that advocating for this outside or independent ticket might have with the candidates that we currently have running as Democrats?
You mean basically you're saying that, the framing that we have is to reject the Democratic label to an extent. And so then how do we support supporting Democrats?
That and just like the time load balancing, because to take this undertaking of a unity ticket, we understand it's improbable. So it's going to take a lot of effort to get it to the point where it could be even feasible. So how do you balance advocating for this unity ticket and trying to be effective there while also being effective for the congressional candidates? Because they're going to need a lot of time also to get their wins across against the establishment candidates.
Yeah, John, that's a good question. But, I think people just kind of, and I hate saying this, and I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, and I know that, but I don't really believe that people should ever tell you how you should spend your own time. I think that is, first of all, that's coming from a scarcity mindset. Second of all, that's strangely authoritarianism. So I think that people will be able to decide whether or not they want to spend any time on this unity ticket. Clearly, there are some people who won't, and whether they would like to personally spend more of their time supporting down ballot candidates, right? We can't really make that decision for any individual human being. And I think that would be very strange if we were trying to do that on anyone.
We can advise them. At the end of the day, they'll make the decision. They could say no to us, but we can say what we believe is the best use of time.
Sure. That's a judgment call, I would say. The best use of time is a judgment call, but I think a lot of people are able to make up their minds if you present them the options. So it's not a secret that there are down ballot candidates, right, who are running. There's not a secret. I interview them on my channel as well. So it's not like I'm saying, ignore them, or anyone is saying, ignore these down ballot candidates and put your energy in here. The one thing I'm actually saying is, hey, can you just spend, 3 seconds and just sign up there? Or just pass this off to someone. It doesn't take people phone banking. It doesn't take people text banking. It doesn't take an inordinate amount of work on anyone's part to basically say, if this became viable, or rather, I support this idea. So I actually push back on that because I honestly think that is that's almost like an argument being thrown at you to try and guilt trip you and shame you away from doing something that you believe in. And
time is our most scarce resource. We can't just create more time. We can create money. We have that control.
Everyone can make that decision for themselves. Everyone is
we can advise them. That's what I think some of our role is as media. And I'd love to hear that balance that you'd like to strike. How do you want to use your time? Do you try and have like 50-50, 75-25?
Well, so John, I would like to ask you a question as well. I mean, are you also advocating? Are you also phone banking? Are you also advocating for people to phone bank and everything like that? Then that's great.
Giving my donation.
Right?
That's what I'm trying to encourage people here at the channel. That's why we hyper focus on down ballot.
That's awesome, John. You are doing a wonderful job doing that, and I applaud you for doing that. Right. But that is your choice, right? That is your choice. It is my choice to also phone bank for certain candidates and text bank for them and donate to them and also interview them and give them some bit of exposure. But that is a choice. And I really just push back. Yes, you can advise them to do that. And I have been doing that. I would argue for the many, many months that I have had my channel, I have dedicated an inordinate amount of time to trying to help give platform, even no matter how small, to down ballot candidates. But for anyone to say you should be spending all of your time doing this, I think that's actually kind of abhorrent for any one single person to think they have any sort of authority over how you as a person should ever spend your time, energy. I think that's just wrong. But so just from that, abstract argument, I just disagree with that. But of course, we want to support our down ballot candidates. And there are so many people who are doing that, right? And I completely applaud them for it. But one thing I would say, and I would ask some people, is it really, let's put it this way, is it better spent... Is your time better spent trying to build up an infrastructure and so a dialogue around an alternate candidate if something, if something catastrophic happens, if this could potentially gain momentum in 2022, 2024? Or is it a better use of your time to try and criticize that effort and criticize the people who are trying to advocate for this online? That is one question I would pose to some people, because it does seem like, and it's not because I'm not actually paying attention to them, but there are some people who are, it does seem like there's a group of people who are literally spending as much time as possible just trying to basically poo-poo this idea. And I would just be asking them, well, if you're going to ask me how I spend my time, I would ask you how you're spending your time.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we do need to spend our time positively, whether we're supporting down ballot candidates through our independent media channels, respectively, or we have other ideas. That's awesome. As long as you're doing something positive and you're actually promoting something rather than shutting something down, then, I'm all for it. I'm all for people taking positive activism, real action, rather than armchair activism and things that don't really move the needle. So I think that we can agree there. As long as we're moving the needle a positive direction, I'm all for it. And I'm all for positive ideas, creative ideas, impossible ideas, because if we don't believe in impossible ideas, who the hell will?
I agree.
So that's just what I'd like to say. I think that we all believe in impossible down ballot candidates. I mean, my race was impossible in so many different ways, and I lost, and it's okay, because you know what? People believed in me, and without that belief, the movement wouldn't continue.
And you know what the thing is, Heidi?
Yeah,
we're gonna run again. Like, I know it because I've interviewed you. I've seen the way that you have spoken about issues. Like, people behind your back have said that you are a rock star, right? Would you have gotten that kind of experience if you did not run?
Heck no. And that's why it's so important to do the impossible. And I recommend people do it at least once daily, honestly. So
you're very, very brave. But I mean, and we're all waiting for you to, get back into the race.
Right. I mean, I will in the future. We'll see what form that takes. But in the meantime, I'll continue to do things that I think are impossible, because that's when we actually make change. I mean, if we listen to everybody that told us what's not possible, then honestly, nothing would ever happen. We wouldn't be on this show right now. None of us would be involved in politics, because they'd be like, you can't do that. You can't start a YouTube channel about some guy who's running for president and, have it do anything, or no one would do anything good. Right. So I think we can all agree there that as long as we're pushing the needle, we're trying to do the impossible. That's what this movement is really about. That's what we're really here to do, is to make a difference, to start an actual political revolution. And in many ways, that's an impossible concept. I mean, really, we're going to change the world? We're going to really like have universal basic income? Come on. Most people would say, we're insane. You're joking. No way the government is going to write checks monthly to every single person. Like, that's not going to happen. Maybe in 200 years, good luck. When we're all living on Mars, maybe they'll send us some space bucks. I don't know. But,
have you heard that? Okay, that's funny. It's actually quite funny.
We could go on and on, but I just want to say that, you know, as somebody who tries to do the impossible, and I know John does as well, and you as well, that, you know, I'm glad that we're doing that and we're pushing the envelope and we're able to have intellectual conversations that, you know, push what is possible, because that's how we do actually have this type of change that we all know that we need. And we all know that we need it. We all know that the duopoly has gone astray. We all know that the two-party system isn't working. We all agree on the fundamentals of what's going on. We might have different ways of getting there, but hey, that's okay. We're all in it together, which is a beautiful thing, I think.
Heidi, that is basically, that was your whole campaign speech for your next run, pretty much. But it's
we'll cut that out, yeah.
That, you know.
We'll edit that out or something.
So Padgett, the last thing I wanted to focus on is where we do agree. It's so important supporting these down ballot races. How do you think we can best be doing this and mobilize the people that are in our movement to be able to do that? Do you think it's across the board? Are there particular people that you want to target? How do you think people can be best effective in that? Because that is such a big thing that we try to focus on here, is supporting the down ballot.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you can donate, then donate, right? You know, again, I have to say that this is, and look, I'm not going to be popular for saying this, but I'm just going to be blunt. Like, there were, for instance, I got criticism because I didn't interview like every single candidate. First of all, how the heck am I supposed to find literally every single candidate? But then I was favoring certain people over others. I was giving them more exposure, and I will put my hands up and say, yeah, maybe I did do that.
Yeah.
You know,
we should.
But what?
We should. We have to be strategic with how we use our time.
That's the point, right? Is that, you know, I guess the way I would advocate it for other people is if you can get familiar with these candidates, right? So you watch an interview on the Hill of Roses, on any Nerds for all these channels, okay? And you're able to get familiar with them, and those who resonate with you, to be honest, I would put my focus there. Yeah. Like, you're going to resonate with some candidates more than others, right? I mean, it's a personal preference. But I do think that a big thing is, look, and I don't know because I've never run, maybe actually Heidi, you could speak to this, but is like, so text banking, you know, is great. Phone banking is really great, but I don't know how much money it takes to be able to get that started. If people knew that and they like set sort of goals, I think that would actually help. Because I think the one thing that people are worried about when they donate to a campaign is they're like, well, what exactly is this going to? Is this going to actually reaching people? What is it going to?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. I mean, I would say that the great thing is that the more money that you have, the more things that you can do and become possible. The worst part about being a candidate is not knowing how much money you're going to get week by week in your little Act Blue check that comes in the mail, not really knowing and not having recurring donations. So one thing I would say is to make a recurring donation if you do find someone that resonates with you, because then they can budget and then they actually know, oh, how many calls can I make? How many texts can I make? How many Facebook ads can I put up this week? Because that really determines, you know, your trajectory and what you can actually project for your campaign. Because I honestly didn't know how hard I could push on anything. I was just like, day by day, like, okay, the check comes in tomorrow, push these, like, because you're flying by the seat of your pants. So I would say, like, find the candidates that resonate with you, donate recurring. You know, if you can make a recurring donation, it helps a ton. And as soon as the campaign ends, it cancels anyway. You don't have to worry about it. And then, of course, phone bank, if you feel so inclined. That's huge. I wish I had an army of phone bankers because, yeah, it would have been costly, but it would have made all the difference in the world. And I would have been glad to pay the cost if it would have meant a victory. So, yeah, I would say I would agree with you. Find the candidates that resonate with you. And you can be somewhat strategic, but you don't have to be too strategic. I mean, you do have to have some kind of passion behind somebody, or you're not going to phone bank for them anyway. And I don't want people phone banking for me as a candidate that aren't passionate about me.
Right. It might not make you look, I mean, it might not represent you in the best light. One other thing that I think is actually very easy for people to do is, look, there are a lot of older people on Facebook, and this is a very easy thing for people to do. And I hate Facebook and I never use it. So now I only use it to post political stuff. But like literally just post to your friends.
Yeah.
Because that does actually get seen. And then also there's something with the algorithm. You know, if we all kind of like posted these people and they get seen more and they get circulated, then I feel like that's it costs nothing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're actually able to get eyeballs on something that otherwise they would have never, ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Calling somebody, if you know any one person that lives in that district, calling them, even if you just know one person, but you got them to call 10 of their friends in the district and commit to calling 5 or 10 more. Yeah. I mean, those types of things, just basic grassroots organizing, traditional methods work highly effectively. So I think that, there's so many different things that we can do just as long as we try, as long as we focus on being positive and going through the daily actions that we need to do. I think that we can make a huge difference in some of these campaigns, especially people like David Kim, already advanced to the general.
Right. Yeah. David Kim, we're definitely going to be going out there and canvassing, and doing because we happen to be in his district. Right. So
how do you feel about that, Padgett? I just want to ask you, because I know that district is, I know it has a high Korean population, but it also has a high Latino population as well, right? Do you feel like I know that the guy who's in is Jimmy Gomez, right? He's Latino. Do you feel like that's a heavy Latino district and that it could shift to somebody else? Because I've heard different things from that district.
It is pure. So, man, this actually makes me a little annoyed because Jimmy Gomez is so effing wrong. Right. Like literally, like I've sent him messages. I tweeted at him, not nasty things, but just like, you're going to be voted out. I've left him voicemails and stuff. Like, why don't you support emergency UBI and everything like that? He's so sad and pathetic. Sorry. Yeah. That I'm like, David Kim. And here's the thing that we do, David Kim, what he's saying about our district is true. Yeah. The income inequality is staggering. There are so many people who are just getting by. And a lot of them, are people of color, right? Mm-hmm. But I think David Kim, he also speaks Spanish, by the way, and he speaks Korean. So he's like got the whole thing going, and he has Spanish materials. Yeah. But that is a big thing, right? Because people see the last name Gomez and they're thinking, well, like, why wouldn't I vote for my own? And I have that instinct too sometimes, right? Whether or not that's bad if I'm not educated. So it really is going to be about, I think, honestly, like somewhere here where there's a lot of activity, even during lockdown, a lot of activity going around, is like holding up the signs, going out to canvas, right? Just like, and he has a whole bunch of posters actually in a whole bunch of businesses that I go into, which is awesome.
That's great.
So I actually think he stands a pretty good shot.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people physically here who are going to be able to support him too, like, getting closer to November. So
that's awesome. That's good to hear. Sure. I mean, I've heard different things, but I know, as much as we don't like to believe it, identity does play a role in these things. So
it does.
I just want to believe that, that he's able to get his message out. And if he speaks Spanish, that's amazing. And I hope that he is out there. I'm sure he is. I guarantee he is speaking to the community. So I just really hope he has a shot, because your district absolutely needs David Kim. And I know I think it's going to be very close. I honestly think it's going to be a close one. And I hope that we can just push him over.
I honestly want to know, because I generally agree. David is super important. I would frankly call him the most important candidate to focus on, in my humble opinion. And I have had a lot of great candidates on, but of the people left, I think he has the best shot and the highest impact that we could deliver with him. Being someone in his district, Padgett, I'd love to hear if you have any advice for David's campaign.
I mean, honestly, he's been doing a very good job. This whole virus situation really doesn't help things. But I go into a restaurant and I will see his poster, right? And this has been for months, actually. So he's really gotten a head start. I mean, he got 20%, over 20% or something in the primary, and that's really good.
Yeah.
You know, when people were paying attention to the Democratic presidential primary, he got 20%. And so no, I don't really have any suggestions, to be honest. I mean, he is obviously going to be outweighed when it comes to getting emails out, because Jimmy Gomez, I literally get an email from him like all the freaking time, and it's so annoying, and I just want to like get him out of there. But I think David Kim is going to actually do, with a number of supporters that I know he has right like in this area. We're going to mobilize, you know. And I think he's actually going to do pretty well. I don't think Jimmy Gomez has that kind of passion at all. So I don't have any advice to give him other than just to keep doing the signs, keep putting up, you know, stuff in businesses. That's really, I mean.
Yeah. How would you feel about commissioning a poll for him if we could get enough funding to get some actual polling? Do you think that huge would help his campaign so that people actually knew where he stands against Jimmy right now, and we could see, you know, what's the room that we need to make up, or where are we right now?
I would love to know how he feels. Do you know how he feels about that?
I brought it up to him and he said he would love to. He asked me, how do I do it? He was like, how do I do it? How much is it? Where do I go? And I'm like, really great question. So I think that we should actually get together and find an independent polling place, find out how much it is, see if we can raise that money for that specific purpose, run a specific campaign for that, and get some independent quality polling going in the district so that we can get some excitement behind his race, similar to like the polling that Charles Booker did that got a huge, you know, a lot of excitement for his race.
What was the polling of Booker that got him that excitement? Like, how well did he have to do in order to get him that excitement?
It was like a little over 300 people in total as a sample size. I think it was from Civics. And I totally want to echo that point. Yeah. I think it's super important that we build, not just for this race, but just as a general infrastructure, more polling apparatuses that are, you know, focused on down ballot candidates in our areas. Because it goes beyond just, you know, polling on the candidates themselves. We can poll on the specific issues, because name recognition and simply hearing the idea enough gets its support. If you haven't heard of an idea, the first thing most people do is be skeptical. So you just kind of have to drill that into people's head by simply asking them. And then it kind of gets treated seriously. If a polling company is coming to you and asking about this candidate and asking about these positions, you're like, oh, this is a serious issue. They're asking my opinion on this right now. And so I think that's a really big long-term thing as well.
No, yeah. I mean, that would be valuable in the long term. I'm trying to balance out, you know, if it's a sample size of 300 people, I don't know how substantial. So I would see like that would be kind of like useful in like getting even just the word out that these are serious candidates, you know, he's a serious candidate. But then you still run into the issue of you still need to get polling data out, like that polling result out to the very people that you need to get attention from. So then would that effort better be, I mean, I don't know. But here's the thing. If people are more willing to vote, rather donate to a specific poll than his campaign in general, then yeah, why not? Right. But if it's a choice, which I don't think it necessarily is, if it is a choice, then I would just be like, well, maybe it would be better spent like actually just like getting the ads out, like the Facebook ad, or I don't know. You know
Probably,
what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. I think that you're right in a way, but then in another way, I mean, I think the Booker poll showed him at like 40%, and then it showed like Mike. It showed Mike at like 5%. So then you totally saw a shift.
And it honestly ended up pretty realistic. Even though it was like 300 people, the results ended up being pretty close to that.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that kind of thing can get media attention. If it's an actual poll that's published, you can get the media being like, wow, David Kim is only 10 points behind Jimmy Gomez.
They love horse race stuff. And that's the biggest horse race thing of them all.
People get excited when they see the polling. You saw how we were always checking the polling during the presidential. People would do whole videos just looking at the freaking polling, you know.
And how mad Yang wasn't included.
That's a great argument that I don't know why I didn't think about this, but like the local papers, the local news stations, they might pick that up and actually run with it. I just am so incredibly skeptical of media in general that I'm like,
yeah, but
I'm never gonna hype that.
But you gotta use their incentives against them. Give them the red meat. You gotta give them something to latch onto for a story, and a poll does that for sure.
And it's only him and Jimmy Gomez, right? It's just them two. So like, that's crazy. I mean, that's powerful because it's literally man on man match. It's like, I mean, we didn't have that.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
That
would be really cool to see. And either way, it would get a big buzz for David's campaign. I believe it would get him more media attention, more followers, more traction. I believe he should have Charles Booker level.
It adds the seriousness to the race because now we can substantiate it with data. Like everyone's like, yeah, we're feeling stuff on the ground. And one camp, if you like him, is like, yeah, I'm optimistic. And the other's like, no, they're not going to work. But then when you have the data, it's like, okay, we can cut through the bullshit. You might disagree on polling methods or whatever, but it's a data point that we can point to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if he feels confident that, I think if it's anything over 40% or 38 or whatever percent, I think it's definitely worth it because then you can literally say, look, he could, like, he's right there. Like, you know,
I think it very well could be. I mean, I think it's very likely that it's over 30% for sure, probably higher, being that it's only them two. There's no splitting of the votes at all. He got, if you look, he got 20%, but there were other challengers in that mix that all endorsed him.
That's a really good point.
And
that
if you
like
add that up, it's like almost 50% right there. So like it's highly likely.
No, Heidi, you're right. I wasn't looking at the numbers as much, but that's true that if anyone, it's like the argument we made with Angie Yang, if anyone's going to vote for any of the people not Jimmy Gomez, the chances that they're going to vote for not Jimmy Gomez when the other people drop out is very, very high because they're voting for not Jimmy Gomez for a reason.
Especially with the endorsements too. It's like a rallying cry. Like if Yang endorsed someone, you're not automatically going to go there, but you're more willing to consider them.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good. He is actually probably over 40%.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. What a buzz would that be if he's like right on his tail? Like that'd be so cool. And we could we could find an independent polling place, location, commission it, find out how much it costs, get the money together. I'm sure we could do it.
And it tells you which voters we still need to get. We can break it down by geography within the district, economic class,
it would tell us exactly
demographics. It tells us where we need to focus. Yep. That's the beauty of polling and the name recognition factor of simply being asked.
Yeah.
I did not think about that. I didn't even know that polling like that would actually break it down to that level of depth.
It'll break it down by age, gender, like ethnicity if you want. Like you can get all those data points, areas that you could target with Facebook ads and phone banking. So much data that you could get from a well done, independent.
Then I do actually think it's worth it for even just for that reason. I think it would be worth it because just for being able to then hyper target your efforts, you'd save so much time and money and effort. So I agree. I think that's a really great idea. I never even thought about the power of polling for congressional districts.
Oh, it's huge. It's so big. It's one of the things that we want to do later in the fall here with the Hill of Roses. Once we get to that organizing phase, polling is huge. So Heidi, I don't know if you have other questions, but that's really all that I would love to cover today. And Padgett, I wanted to thank you so much for being here to talk through all these, sometimes contentious, but sometimes really unifying causes that we have here.
Look, it's discussions that need to be had because I'm not about to go on Twitter and blast people 24/7. So I'm glad you brought up the contention because I know that it's been circulating in some way, and I don't have the thumbs or whatever to keep doing that. So glad
I agree. It's much easier to understand people when you're not limited to 280 characters at a time, and you get to see them face to face and see that they're a lovely person all the same.
Or see that they're full of
They can't just go like, oh, well, let me do a little research. Okay, here's the URL, done. You have to kind of like know what you're talking about when you're doing it live.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much, Padgett. It's always a pleasure. And I just want to say thank you for all your continued work, and you're just awesome. That's all I gotta say about that.
Oh, you're so awesome, Heidi. Can't wait until your next run. Let us know.
Absolutely. I'll definitely let you know.
We'll make sure that it gets out there. I don't think anyone's going to miss Heidi Brion.
I know. I'm just trying to hype. I'm trying to hype you. And, but anyway, guys, thank you so much for having me on. And I really enjoyed this, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
See you guys out there.
See you, Padgett. Thank you for coming on again. Okay. So we got a lot to get to, folks. We were so happy getting to talk with Padgett there today. I think it's really important that we have these conversations of what the future of the movement is, as well as learning from the past. With that being said, I just had a couple of final plugs to give for the channel. We have some content coming out tomorrow around how a worldwide protest nearly failed, but it ended up didn't. And that'll be with Grayson Asbith. He's coming on tomorrow to be able to talk with us. I'm going to be also going on to Thorns and Roses with him. We're going to be having similarly more The Hill of Roses content providers on July 6th with Brianna Cardenas coming on to preview her article about riots versus protests. And then we got the big interview July 7th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, unlike our traditional interviews. So please make sure you all are here for that interview. Again, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's for the man himself, Andrew Yang. We're willing to give some exceptions. So with that being said, that's all I got. Heidi, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would say just, to everybody out there, keep believing in the impossible, keep working hard for what you believe in. And that's what we're here to do, is really just support you, support causes that we care about, and move the needle further so that we can create a more universally fulfilling, happy society for everybody. So thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you, especially July 7th. Don't miss Andrew Yang on the channel. But thank you so much for being here, and just keep blooming into the beautiful bouquet that you are, okay?
Yeah, it's so true. And you know what? We have to accept our differences all the time. Today, we got to see that Heidi and I had a little disagreement, and that's more beautiful, frankly. It's a variety of opinions. So we're so thankful for you all tuning in today. We're so thankful Padgett took the time to be able to speak with us. And until next time, I hope you guys are staying rosy out there.